little announcement. All right. So I wanted to say welcome to everybody. Did you all get a chance to see no, that was for, the VCA Great Lakes speaker, Catherine Horvath. Did anybody get a chance to see her last week? No. Oh, you did? Was it good? Was it good information? Interesting? Okay.
It was mostly just a conversation, but she answered any of our questions.
Oh, well, that's good. That's really good. Wonderful. I wanted to tell you all that they are announcing a new attendance policy today at Valley College, where they're giving more points based on if the student can make it to the whole Zoom meeting. If the student can only be there for half, they're not giving as many points. And so I just wanted to let you know.
I do have a question, Miss Boswell. Mr. Kirkhan, he was giving like attendance if we went back and watched the Zoom call, because he's able to see if we watched it. Are you? I know each like instructor is different, but I was wondering if you're doing that as well.
No, but I have been taking them, taping the Zoom things, and I haven't posted them, but I could email them to you all so that you could see them.
Yeah, that would be for last week I missed Wednesday and Thursday, so if I'm able to get those days, I just didn't know if you would like give like half credit or participation points for being there. That's all.
Yeah, I think there are participation points for getting your homework in, so it kind of helps in that regard. If you weren't able to be here, but you got your homework in, I think you get some participation points. So that was kind of how I was doing it.
That's fine. That's perfect. I just wanted to know.
Okay. Okay. Are there other questions, comments? Good. The quiz scores were pretty good. The quiz scores were pretty good. I was pretty proud of you all. That was really wonderful. So today we're going to do chapter 6. And the interesting thing about this assignment is that it's going to be a little bit based on chapter 6 and a little bit based on chapter 4, which we did on Friday. We're skipping chapter 5 for now anyway. So we're jumping ahead. It's the nonverbal dimension of communication. I think this one's fascinating. I think this one is fascinating. There is a video on Moodle that's a TED Talk that you could watch. It's a woman who interprets body language for a living. She's done it for the FBI, and she shares what she has learned from watching serial killers. And it's kind of off-putting, but then she uses it not just for detecting crime, but for like helping her child understand her child's anger a little bit better and stuff. And it's interesting. It was a little bit long. I have a different one. We may have time to take a peek at it, but I'm not sure. We're going to start on page 109 in the book, and we're going to look at nonverbal communication. Sometimes what you do, it says, speak so loud that I cannot hear what you say. That's Ralph Waldo Emerson. And we're going to look at lots of parts, things about nonverbal communication. And I'm going to throw up the PowerPoint so you can see it as well. I sent you an agenda so you can follow along in your book because it tells what pages, and I'm going to be doing the PowerPoint. So I can see you, but I think if I turn on the PowerPoint, you can possibly not see me. Honey, where's the PowerPoint? It's right here. All right. So the nonverbal dimension of communication, it says, is not just body language, but it's also what we wear. It's what our body posture, our eye contact, and our vocal inflection. So not just if we say a word, but how we phrase it. If you say, did you know? The way we have that inflection go up means in our language, it's a question. In other languages, that might not have the same meaning. And I was learning Chinese on Duolingo, and they don't use inflection to ask a question. They put the word ma at the end. So they would say, do you know ma? And that would be, it's a question. But here we ask a question, and it's so common. I've noticed my dog knows if I'm asking a question. Do you want to go out? He's like, what? Speaking of animals and animal lovers, the writer of this book is a volunteer at an animal shelter with wild animals like tigers. I don't know if you saw that in the beginning. I meant to tell you that. Is the PowerPoint up, hon? No. I really need that. So, I wanted to do a small experiment. Say the word "oh." We're going to try different vocal inflection. This is part of nonverbal communication. We're going to say the word "oh" in different ways. Say the word "oh" like you just saw a puppy and you want to cuddle it. Oh. Say the word "oh" like you don't trust me, but you don't want to be rude, and I've just told you an outrageous thing. Oh. Say the word "oh" like your brother just bashed into you in basketball. Oh. I'm sorry for this one. Say the word "oh" like you've just stepped in something questionable or disgusting. Oh. Say the word "oh" like you just won the championship. Oh. So you see just the vocal inflection of that short little word. You can get a lot of meaning just from the tone, the way we pitch, use our pitch. I thought that was fun. I wish I could have heard you all at the same time. Nonverbal behaviors account for, and this is a wide range, 65 to 93% of the total communication meaning. That's a lot. That means that what we do, how we present ourselves, every bit of it is all adding up, and it's more important or it's more meaningful than what we say. I think that's interesting, and I think that's why we're going to take a whole look at it. They have 3 scenarios in this little box in the green up at the top that says Mind Tap. Does someone want to read the little scenario 1 at the top? Well, a student at Yale, Kenta Koga, it's at the top of 110. The first paragraph has 2 scenarios in it, how nonverbal communication can affect our career, our world, our life. Danielle, thank you.
While a student at Yale, Kenta Koga interned with a Japanese company, hoping that would lead to a permanent position, it didn't. Kenta was criticized by his supervisors for speaking up and for crossing his arms in front of a senior colleague. A student from Brown University, also interning in a Japanese company, was told she could not be hired because she laughed too much.
Very interesting. Anybody else want to take the next scenario? It's a little more positive.
I'll read it.
Okay, thank you.
Maria notices a nice looking guy who is studying 2 tables away from her in the library. When he looks up at her, she lowers her eyes. After a moment, she looks back at him just for a second. A few minutes later, he comes over, sits down beside her, and introduces himself.
Is that, if it could be that easy all the time, right? You just flash your eyes and people appear. That's very nice. Thank you.
I'm sorry, what page are we on?
110.
110.
110. So there was a little green box at the top in the Mind Tap section, and it was giving some scenarios about how interaction, nonverbal communication can work. So these examples that we just read, that Danielle and Monique just read, illustrate the power of nonverbal communication, and it can be negative or positive. And nonverbal communication can encompass everything from dress to eye contact, to body posture, to vocal inflection. And we'll talk about that a little bit. Like for dress at an interview, if you're dressed in a way that they expect, it goes better than if you're dressed in a way that the interviewer sees as disrespectful, perhaps, or unprepared. And maybe we shouldn't judge on the way we dress, but it does send messages that others interpret. So nonverbal communication is all aspects of communication except for words, including how we say words, uttering them, volume, being loud can convey excitement or anger or power. Being soft can convey weakness or comfort. Or Jackie Kennedy used to always talk in a whisper, and they said people would lean in because they wanted to hear what she said, but now they're in her inner circle. And that among mammals is like a good place to be. Now we're friends. Now we're on the same team. So I don't know if it works for everybody, but it was a strategy I think that she had to make people kind of like her. Now, it is similar to verbal communication in many ways, but it's also different. So we'll take a look at the similarities on page 111. Nonverbal communication is symbolic. When we say cup, it's not a cup, right? That's a symbol. And when we go, it's a symbol of something, and it might be open to interpretation, right? In my house, when my mom did that, it meant you better sit down and be nice. We're in public. That was the symbol, right? But she was hoping that other people didn't get that symbol and they thought her children were just little angels. So it is sort of ambiguous, and that's why it's hard to pin it down necessarily. Hi LG Stylo 3. Well, welcome. Hi Alana. Hi Nicole. We're on page 111, looking in chapter 6, talking about nonverbal communication. I'm seeing nonverbal communication from others. Okay, good. So nonverbal communication is anything that's not the word itself. So it is symbolic, so it's arbitrary. It also these are guided by rules that we follow. Like in some cultures, laughing is seen as positive and encouraging, but as we saw, the rules in Japanese culture in this little green box are that laughing too much is not being serious enough to get the job. So the rules might be different about these kind of nonverbal communications. They are culture bound. They may be unintentional or they may be intentional. You may nod your head intentionally, but a woman said that sometimes people shrug their shoulders when they're uncertain, and they might do it unintentionally. You might be frowning unintentionally. You might frown very directly at your children to get them to notice that you're not happy, but sometimes you'll be just thinking about something and a frown comes out over your face. And so sometimes it's unintentional. It's for that reason that people often think that nonverbal communication is more true, because it's unintentional and they feel like it's just coming out. But there isn't really any research that says it's more honest than verbal communication. Often we think that. We think we're getting the scoop. We think we're getting to read what they didn't want us to see. But there isn't any evidence that it's any more true than our words. Differences. I just said it is perceived as more honest, but it isn't. It's multi-channeled. It's another way of giving the same message. So they give the example of sometimes you get a hug from somebody while they're saying, I love you. So you're getting words and a hug. You're getting verbal and nonverbal. They're two multi-channels. They said, and this is, I think it's interesting, in verbal communication is usually just straight words, right? But you can be nodding, you can be smiling, and that's giving two other nonverbal communications. They said, nonverbal communication can be felt, heard, smelled, and tasted. And I was thinking, ugh. But I think, sometimes when people are nervous, they might sweat and have a nervous smell. Dogs can smell fear. So there might be some smells that are nonverbal communication. And nonverbal communication is more continuous. It's always going, even when we're not talking. We're looking out the window, we're crossing our arms, we're tapping our pen on the table saying, let's go, let's go. Yeah, so it goes on. Sometimes it adds to the verbal communication. We say yes and we nod. Sometimes it supplements it. We don't bother to say anything, we just nod. And it regulates interaction. Sometimes, we use our eyes to call on a student, to look at them. We nod in their direction. It kind of helps regulate interaction. there are cross-cultural nonverbal clashes. And this little scenario talks about two people who went to China, Tang and his colleague, and they were meeting with pharmaceutical plants executives. But although Tang was really well liked, his colleague was not. And it turned out that they interpreted what he was doing as aggressive. In American society, we're often taught to look people in the eye. We think it conveys honesty. You're told when you interview with somebody, look them in the eye, shake their hand really firmly. And we say to kids, look me in the eye and tell me you didn't break the cookie jar, because we think that it connotes honesty. But to some cultures, it connotes aggression. And so if you're not supposed to be looking people you don't know in the eye, it's seen as kind of unfriendly and aggressive, and they were put off by him. And the guy who came home studied intercultural, cross-cultural, nonverbal clashes, and he noticed that facial expressions are very often problematic when you go from culture to culture. I was going to tell you something about that. Oh, I met a guy, he used to be my neighbor, and he points, he's from a different culture, and they point with their mouth. Where is that? Over there? Over there. But they also, I think when they see you, they do this to say hi. Hey. But I thought he was blowing me kisses. And I thought, why is the new neighbor blowing me kisses? I just wasn't used to that little cultural difference. So they have a really interesting little system in this whole chapter of little vignettes, little stories told by through the point of view of some people who've lived them. And the first one is Darcy. Does anybody want to read Darcy's little comments on regulating interaction? 113. We use our eyes and our posture to indicate we want to enter conversations. We invite people to speak by looking directly at them, as I'm doing. Nobody's looking at me because you're all looking at your book. Anybody want to read Darcy's little paragraph on 113?
I would read it, but I have way too much background noise. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I'll do it. I'll do it.
I can read it.
Oh, thank you. You saved us.
Darcy, I know one guy who dominates every conversation.
Well, you got to come closer to the mic.
Sorry.
Come.
Getting my book. Okay.
Okay.
I know one guy who dominates every conversation. I'd never noticed this until we studied how nonverbal behaviors regulate turn taking. This guy won't look at others when he's talking. He looks out into space, or sometimes he gives you a hard stare, but he never looks at anyone like he's saying, okay, your turn now.
So we do use our eye contact sometimes aggressively. He's given him a hard stare. And I remember that when I was taking dog behavior training, he said a dog giving another dog a hard stare means back off. And I think this exists in the world of mammals. Think about going to a job interview and having the person come and sit across from you and maintain a stare the entire interview. Is that weird? Is it intimidating? Would you hire that person? Would you scoot back?
Yeah, I learned though, when you give a dog a hard stare in my training class, I learned that you're basically like challenging them, like to fight,
Yeah. I think that's true. It can be a sign of aggression. And so I think even in people, a continuous hard stare is a sign of aggression. And that's why we use it here as a way to invite, but it's not a prolonged, angry, hard stare. It's eye contact a little bit. In fact, research has shown when two people are looking at each other, the more powerful one is usually the one to look away first, and they're getting ready to speak. So you don't want to get in a staring contest with somebody. That's kind of not the point. And this nonverbal communication, which we were just talking about, this kind of establishes relationship level meanings. So there are three different ways that you can kind of reinforce the relationship through nonverbal meanings or establish what it is. One is responsiveness. We use nonverbal communication to respond. We use eye contact, facial expressions, body interest to show that we're more interested in somebody. But sometimes it doesn't work cross-culturally. And here's a little example. Miriam says, Americans do more than one thing at a time. In Nepal, when we talk with someone, we are with that person. We don't also write on paper or have the TV on. We talk with the person. It's hard for me to accept the custom of giving only some attention to the conversation to each other. And so responsiveness with your whole attention is sometimes required. And in some cultures, they see us as not doing enough. That's interesting. But we have different rules for showing responsiveness. And that's a relationship. We have a relationship, we're talking, I should be listening. But at what level might be culturally determined. Here, very often in our families, we have the TV on and we have the phone on and there's somebody else talking and we're multitasking. And we don't necessarily see it as rude. We see it as a facet of life, right? So another thing that this nonverbal communication can do to establish relationships, it can show liking. Touching can show liking. Standing close to people can show liking. Eye contact, smiles, sitting together in groups. Those are all ways we show that we like people. I did want to say something about touching. Touching is changing in America. And now I think it's a challenge to touch people. I would say at work, be really careful about touching your colleagues. Even if you're used to touching people in your family, hugging or patting on the back, maybe at work, hold off until you see, because the whole idea of consent and touching is a kind of a big deal now. And if you have to touch somebody, maybe just arms and elbows. Isn't that what they say? Maybe shake hands. Definitely don't touch them up here. Power. This is one of the other aspects. The third aspect of relationship level meanings of nonverbal communication is power. We use nonverbal communication to assert dominance or that we're express deference and to negotiate status. People with bosses who are bosses, they say touch people who have less power. They touch them more. They pat them on the back. They also take up more space, and generally men take up more space and use greater volume and more forceful gestures. I don't know if you've seen this. There were bus and subway campaigns in New York City getting men to realize that they were taking up more space. Had you seen those campaigns? Sometimes when they get in the subways, they're used to sitting with their legs apart and they're just comfortable. They didn't necessarily mean anything, but often the women didn't have any place to sit and a guy was taking up 2 seats. So they had these campaigns a year ago, and they were calling it manspreading. And they were asking the men to take 1 seat so that women would have a place to sit. And it got a little controversial. Some of the men are like, well, we didn't mean anything. That's just the way we sit. But in our culture, men do take up more space and they're kind of allowed to, encouraged to, right? It's a sign of power, the more space you can take up physically. And so if you want to be powerful, take up a lot of space. Ramona has a different take on this. And this was even more interesting, I thought, than just the space that a person takes up. Ramona on page 114 says, in my home, my father sits at the head of the table. And he has his chair in the family room and in his workroom. My mother does not have her chair anywhere in the house. And she doesn't have a room of her own either. So she doesn't have a workroom or the family room place. She is up working apparently. So space kind of connotes who's more powerful in that house. The connection between power and space is evident in the fact that CEOs usually have big offices, corner offices, right? And entry-level and mid-level professionals have smaller offices. And secretaries often have small workspaces, even though secretaries often store a lot of material, more material than even the higher up people, but they're often given less space because they're not as powerful in the company. So space is something that connotes power. It's a way we communicate non-verbally that we have more or less power. And then nonverbal communication can reflect cultural values. And they ask you if you've ever seen this bumper sticker. Has anybody ever seen this in the car? It says, if you can read this, you're too close. And it says, and I didn't realize that this was something cultural. I thought this was just a personal value. It says North Americans are territorial. We value space, and we have a space bubble around us. Like, don't get too close to my car. If you read this, you're too close. And we're a territorial species in general, and the North Americans culturally are often, we have a lot of space in America. We live in bigger houses. We're used to more space. I remember taking a sociology class, and they said, well, Americans are pretty territorial. And I thought to myself, I'm not territorial. And they said, look around your place, your seat, and what have you done? And I had books, I had my backpack, I had more books, and I had a soda. I had made a little wall around my territory so nobody could get in. And I've seen people do that. I've become more aware that I do that. I sit down, I stake out my territory without even thinking that that's what I was doing. In cultures where individuality is less valued and more communality or family is more valued, people tend to be less territorial. They don't think about, get this space for me. They're used to standing closer to each other, to having less space. For example, your book talks about Brazilian people, and they say they routinely stand very close together in shops. And if they bump into each other, they don't usually pull away, and they don't usually apologize. It's not seen as an infraction. Have you ever been in an elevator and there are 4 people and 2 people get out? What do the other 2 do? They spread out. They spread out. I feel like we're like gas molecules in a heated condition, and we get as far away from each other as we can. Have you ever been in a movie theater and you sit in one place? If someone comes and sits too close to you and there are plenty of spaces, do you feel a little bit like, why are they sitting close to me? There's plenty of space. Yeah, we do have a space expectation. In America, it's about an arm's length. In Australia, I think it's even further. In some Mediterranean countries, it's much closer. In some Arabic countries, it's much closer. So people may come closer to you because that's their experience, and they may not realize it makes us feel a little infringed upon. Here's a little passage by Tzu Ching. Anybody want to read Tzu Ching's passage? I'm using my eyes to invite you all to read. Oh, thank you, Danielle.
In the United States, each person has so much room. Every individual has a separate room in which they sleep, and sometimes another separate room in which they work. Also, I see that each family here lives in a separate house. People have much less space in China. Families live together, with sons bringing their families into their parents' home and all sharing the same space. At first, when I came here, it felt strange to have so much space. But now I sometimes feel very crowded when I go home.
Interesting. Interesting. We're used to it, so we don't necessarily think of it as different. It's nice to see it through somebody else's eyes. Thank you for reading that. They talk about space. They also talk about eye contact may be different culturally. In the United States, frankness and assertion are valued, so we're told to meet each other's eyes, at least sometimes. It's considered appropriate and a demonstration of honesty. But in many Asian and North European countries, it's discouraged. It's considered abrasive and disrespectful. Also, sometimes in the military, depending on your rank in the branch, I've heard that you're not allowed to look superiors in the eye all the time, only when you're spoken to. They're greeting cultures, and you may have seen this. In some cultures, we shake hands, or we did until recently because of the pandemic. Many people shake hands. In Arab cultures, there's a kiss, often one kiss. In France, there's a 2-kiss system. It's called la bise, the kiss. Sometimes it's 3 in some countries.
Hispanics kiss as well.
Do they?
Yeah, we do a little kiss on the cheek. Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. I worked with a woman, and she was from Croatia. And when I worked with her, she would greet me with a wave. But when I went to her home and her family was there, everyone who entered the home got a little kiss. So she just kind of adjusted it to, in her home, they were more Croatian, and at work, they were more American communication style oriented. And then they talk about bowing is culture in many cultures in Asia. In India, very often they'll touch the ground or touch someone's feet to show respect as a greeting, touch another person's feet. So in sum, we've noted 5 features of nonverbal communication. There's similarities and differences between them. Nonverbal communication can kind of add to it or totally replace verbal communication. Regulates interaction. We look at people, it means it's your turn to talk. It's your turn to talk. That's one thing we do. Another thing is we call on them. Another thing we do is we stop talking. I've noticed when people are giving a speech, have you ever noticed, or they're talking at a meeting and they keep saying and they never stop. They never give another person a chance. That's a nonverbal communication. Another problem that I've noticed is when people are giving speeches, often when they're new and they stop to gather their thoughts, they'll say, and they'll say to me, well, how can I stop saying, And I have a lot of thoughts on that, but I think the reason they're doing it is they don't want to stop talking because that will tell the audience they're done. So they say, to kind of unconsciously let the audience know I'm still talking, I'm thinking, I'm not done, because they don't want it to be over. I think practice and getting used to speaking is a good way to do that, by the way, since I brought it up. Some people think that the handshake here will go out of fashion because of the pandemic and it will never come back. How many people think it will go away? That will be replaced with a high five, a wave, an elbow, a bow? I saw somebody doing a hand over the heart. Yeah. Do you do a lot of handshakes anyway? How many people do?
I feel like I used to be a hugger and now like you can't hug people. Like that's like really sad.
Yeah. Although that is tricky in the workplace too. It is tricky in the workplace anyway. It's sort of going away.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But it's going, the hugging is going, I think it's on hold for now. We'll see where it ends up, right? Yeah.
You only shake somebody's hands, they got gloves on.
Yeah. The gloves make that little sticky noise. We're going to race through types of nonverbal communication starting in 115. And some of these words are fancy, but I think you may have already known them. Kinesics. It's like kinesthesiology. It's body motion, body position, including the face in motion. It's movement, body positions, body motions, facial expressions, and gestures. And these are forms of nonverbal communication. They kind of keep things going. We point to people, that means go. We do this, it means go on. So we're regulating other people's behavior with them. It's culturally bound. You know, in America, this means peace, the peace sign, but in Britain, it doesn't mean peace or victory. It used to mean victory, V for victory. Can you see me doing it? In Britain, after World War II, when they were declaring victory, the American soldiers were doing this, but in Britain, this is not the sign for victory. It's a one-fingered salute. So it was a very rude gesture that they were making inadvertently. I know. And we do this, okay? It's okay. In Brazil, that's a very rude gesture. Please do not make that if you're traveling in Brazil. It does not mean okay. It means something rude. In Nigeria, this is not a friendly wave. This is an insult. It means you have 5 fathers. It's not a very nice thing to say to somebody. So sometimes the differences are just innocent, and sometimes they actually could be harmful if you could insult somebody. Not meaning to, but it's interesting. Before you travel, know their cultural signs. Know their cultural signs a lot. There's more. Haptics. Haptics is physical touch, and we've been talking about this. Touch is so important to us, but it also is used to communicate power and status. People of higher power seem to feel that they can touch people of less power. women tend to touch each other more than men. Men don't seem to touch each other as much. There seem to be rules. It's all gender kind of affected. It's called haptics. Did you know that word? Haptics means touch. Physical appearance. And this has several things to say. It says that Western culture places an extremely high value on appearance. And it's not only just beauty and attractiveness, but also you can see the kind of facelifts and surgeries that men and women have had. Talks about thinness or muscularity. It talks about height and even hair. I had a friend in my hometown, he would dye his hair brown even when he got gray hair because he felt like at his work they wanted young people and he wanted to look young. So physical appearance can show your age, and as well as, you know, other things. And it seems to be really an important feature of American culture, not so much in every culture. We were talking about social media may have made it worse, where people are thinking about themselves in terms of their appearance a lot, as opposed to what they're doing. And it points out that our initial judgments may be inaccurate, but they still can affect our decisions about friendships, dating, and hiring. And they have some evidence that people who are perceived as above average in attractiveness are hired in some fields more often, which could add up to a lot of money over the course of a career. I actually read it. I read a study that was a little more, it said that men hire women they perceived as more attractive, and women did not hire the women they perceived as more attractive. That's not a nice study. It doesn't make the women look good. So I don't know if that's categorical, but I think it means that it's a more nuanced situation. And also, we don't all consider the same people attractive. So that may not be it may not be easy to gauge if they were really hiring on attractiveness, because they're probably not going to say, oh, I hired that person because I thought they were attractive. They might not even realize it. They say that standards for attractiveness vary from culture to culture. They say with ethnicity, probably from age to age. I've been really excited about the younger generation recently. They're saying, you don't think we're pretty? We don't care. We're pretty. And we're strong, and that's good. That's part of pretty. And they're just no longer going to take other people laying a standard of beauty on them. They're saying, no, we determine if we're pretty. We're pretty. And I'm like, I feel good about society when I see how strong the younger people, younger than I, are leading us, you know, and they say, no, you don't get to decide and make me feel bad about myself. I'm pretty. I know it. And off they go. And I like that. I think things are changing. That's just my little hope. What do you think? By the way, I did see a really interesting interview with Dustin Hoffman. He was an actor. He's in mid to late 70s now. And when he was younger, he was in some movies I really liked. And I thought he was a really interesting actor. And then I saw him in an interview about 5 years ago, and he had tears in his eyes. And he said, you know what, when I was younger, I was kind of a jerk. I was famous, and I would only date women I thought were really attractive. And then he started crying and he said, and I missed out on some really interesting people. And I thought, well, I'm glad he sees that. You know, I'm glad he sees that his quick judgment led him down the wrong path. Here's a sad story about attractiveness in 118. Perception of attractiveness or appearance. Does anybody want to read Cass? The story by Cass?
I'll read it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, it says, I found out how much appearance mattered when I was in an auto accident. It messed up my face so that I had scars all over one side and on my forehead. All of a sudden, nobody was asking me out. All these guys who had been so crazy about me before the accident lost interest. Some of my girlfriends seemed uneasy about being seen with me. When I first had the wreck, I was so glad to be alive that I didn't even think about plastic surgery. After a couple of months of seeing how others treated me, however, I had the surgery.
Oh,
Wow.
I know. I heard the same reaction I had when I read that. I went, oh, I mean, I'm with her. She felt so happy just to have survived. And it wasn't enough in her mind because she felt like even her friends were kind of thinking she should look different. And she went and had surgery. What do you think? Comments?
I think that's really big on how others treat people. I don't understand why appearance is so big for people, you know?
Yeah.
I think it should be more, you know, the personality and what they have to offer than their outside looks. And it sucks that people have to feel that they have to go and change themselves because other people are not accepting them, you know? It's kind of
Yeah.
sad. It's kind of sad.
I always ask people about Gilligan's Island, which people used to not remember. And then Nick at Night came and I said, oh, God bless Nick at Night. Now people have seen Gilligan's Island. Who was contributing more, perhaps Ginger or Marianne? I don't know. Ginger baked a little, but do you remember that show? No. Okay. I
Yes,
used to have
yes,
students.
I remember the show.
Yes. Ginger was a movie star and she got marooned on this island with everybody else, and everybody brought their gifts to build a community on the island. But although she did bake pies, she mostly walked around in evening gowns. Wasn't as helpful, I thought. But I don't think that was the point of the show. I used to have students write about, would you rather be smart or pretty? Smart or handsome, or smart or good looking in our culture.
Oh.
And people would write different things, and a lot of them said smart. And a lot of them said, well, if you're smart, you can get a good job and then you can buy plastic surgery and you can be prettier. I was like, well, is that the goal? But some of the men said they wanted to be smart, and then they felt like they could get money, and money would get them very attractive partners. That money brought, that they were supposed to earn money. That was how they felt judged. And then they were judging women on attractiveness. And they felt like the more money they had to offer, the prettier a person they could date. And I thought, that just seems so transactional, really. I don't know. It made me sad. But a lot of them said they'd rather,
like in this year, these years that's been coming, like that's really what it is. Like, you know, like people with money are getting, I would say, a lot more attractive people because they do have that income, you know. And it's sad to say, but I really feel like that is true. A lot of us women, I feel like, look at men that have money and think that is the answer to happiness, you know, or to feel good or whatever. But I don't know.
well, what they were kind of saying was that for women, their beauty was a commodity that they could trade for status with a partner who had more money. And that was what was more expected of women, was to be very attractive, and men were to be very wealthy. And I thought, well, where's the being kind or being a hard worker or being interesting? You know, we're losing things when we're just using those two. But it seems to be that it's seen as a message. Physical appearance, people read things from it, rightly or wrongly. And it seems to be a way that we get information about people, make judgments about people based on their appearance. And it might not just be attractiveness. It might be on the way they dress. Are they very stylish? Are they very pop, fashion forward? Or are they more conservative and comfortable? You know, are they look like they're ready to work, or they're ready to not work because they look so fancy. It's an interesting, we could spend a whole class talking about the way we judge people's appearance. Another thing is artifacts, which is kind of like clothes, but these are personal objects we use to announce, this is mine, this is who I am. They can be a flag pin kind of thing, religious jewelry, how we dress, the objects we carry and use. And the things that we put in our private spaces. If we have a cubicle at work and we put pictures of our kids, we put picture of our dog, we put a picture of our home, a picture of our family, kind of says, I value family. You know, it kind of gives a message what we value. And it's something that people can gauge. They evaluate us based on our artifacts. And we kind of know that when we put them out there. Is this appropriate for work? Is this the thing I want to put at work? Is this the picture I want to put on Facebook? Because what does it say about me? Also, artifacts can they can express religious or non-religious beliefs, political beliefs, even ethnic identity. So just the things that people surround themselves with often reflect parts of their identity, who they are. That's artifacts. I feel like we're archaeology exhibits. Naomi says, I've moved a lot since coming to college, dorm, apartment, another apartment, and another apartment. I never feel a place is home until I put the picture of my grandmother holding me on my dresser. Then it's home. Oh, that made me feel so happy. That one really did. Artifacts also include tattoos. Approximately 1/3 of Americans in the 25 to 29-year range have at least one tattoo. Although many people who get tattoos later want to get rid of them. And people like this man, Dr. Tatoff, that cannot be his name. He takes tattoos off and his name is Dr. Tatoff. That cannot be his name. He says that he has performed more than 110,000 tattoo removals. I hear those are painful. So that is an artifact. It's an interesting time in our culture because traditionally tattoos were used to say I was an outsider. I'm an outsider. I'm in a motorcycle group. I'm a rebel kind of person. I'm an outsider of the mainstream culture. But now they are so common there. I am a part of the mainstream culture. I am an insider. So the whole message of tattoos has sort of changed. When I was younger, very few people had them. But now many people have many, many tattoos. I had a student once, she had 19. And she was 19. So I don't know if she has more now. Does anybody have a tattoo?
I got 9.
You have 9.
Yeah.
And
they're all flowers and roses because I love flowers. And I just love everything about roses. And besides my daughter and my mom name.
So they
Nice.
express your identity. They are an artifact that helps you express your identity.
That's what I'm about to do too. On my whole left arm is going to be animals. I already have 3 now, but then my right side is going to be my kids and my mom.
Oh,
That'd be nice.
kids you love and animals you love and your mom.
Yep.
Part of your identity, what's important to you.
Yep.
Brianna.
I have 3 as well. Yeah, I have a lion here, my son's name, and then a butterfly.
Oh, and
Yeah.
what? And the lion is part of your.
Yeah, I'm a Leo, and it just a lot of things. My tattoos are really for therapy wise. They're really therapeutic. I don't know. Yeah, I lost my baby last month, so I got this just to help me. So I feel like they help. You know, they kind of help me. Yeah.
You have a memory, memorial. Yeah, that's beautiful. I don't have any tattoos. I'm probably the only one.
I don't have any tattoos.
No,
It's
you
not a
don't have
good feeling. So, hey, I don't.
Me either. I have more than tattoos.
Oh, well, tattoos are artifacts, and so is jewelry. But I just think that's interesting. They're actually part of us, but they're considered artifacts, I guess, in that category. That was an interesting little example of artifacts. Thank you. Here's one. It's an interesting word, proxemics. It sounds like proximity. How close, it's space and how we use it. Every culture has norms for using space and for how close people should be together. And there's this famous study that says we interact with social acquaintances from 4 to 12 feet, but we're comfortable with 18 inches or less between close friends or romantic partners. If you think about car salespeople, I don't know if you've ever bought a car. A lot of times now people are buying them on the internet. But it used to be you had to go in person. And when you would go in person, one of the first things that often happened was the car salesperson would shake your hand. And as they're shaking your hand, they pull you in closer. And the inner circle is about this big. Mammals consider this, inside this, where we keep our friends and close ones. So now suddenly the car salesperson has pulled you closer and you're on a team. We are looking for your car. We're looking for our car. And it's harder to say no to somebody who's on our team standing really close to us, where we would let family and friends. We had a dog trained. We had a dog we took to behavior class, and he was telling us about when dogs play and they play and they run at you but don't let you catch them. They come really close. That's the range. They know what your space bubble is exactly.
Oh, my dog does that all the time.
How far you can no longer catch them. They know exactly that limit, because inside that is part of the inner ring. And they know that as a mammal, but they know if you're right there, they can't get caught and they run away. Yeah, that's a good game for dogs. They're checking, see if you can catch them, is what he said. He said they're always seeing, am I faster? Can I still get away? Now look at this picture. I want you to see this picture, because this is some information I'm going to give you that I think may be interesting, hopefully, possibly help you. Do you see this man's position? What does it say? Does it say I'm the boss? Does it say I'm here for my interview? No, that would be a little overreach for interview. There's this woman named Ann Cuddy, and I think she works at UCLA in Berkeley. She did a lot of research on nonverbal communication, and she said that they did research based on hormones. They did cheek swabs with people, but they found out that space connotes power in our culture. We were talking about that. If you take up more space, you have more power. But also, we often think that our mind makes the decision and tells our body what to do, right? I want to walk over there. I made the decision with my mind and my body goes with me, right? That the mind is in control. And she said it's a it's a two-way street. You can, by positioning your body, you can change your mind. And this is what she did. She asked people to stand in power positions or sit in power positions. And the idea is to take more space. This. Can you see it? Stand, taking more space. Stand like this. That's more power. If you have to sit with your legs apart for a minute or cross your legs, taking up big space. She said that when people do that for 2 minutes, or they stand, they call it the Wonder Woman position. They're standing with their feet apart, their head up, their arms out, taking up as much space. It increased their levels of testosterone by 30%. Increased their levels in men and women, testosterone, the risk-taking hormone. And it decreased cortisol, the stress hormone, by 10%. So what she says is before an interview, often we're sitting in the waiting room and we're sitting on a chair small. We're looking at our phone, we're very small. That is sending our body message to our brain, I'm afraid. If we cross our legs, we're taking up less space, we're protecting ourselves, and we don't get confident, we get afraid. She said, if you sit like this is the least powerful at all, because this means I'm guarding my neck. I'm really afraid. So she said, deliberately, you may have to go in the restroom, but stand as big as you can for 2 minutes before an interview. Don't come in and put your feet on their desk and do it in there. But if you have to, then you'll be able to meet you'll be braver and have more confidence. And it may serve you well in an interview or other positions of other times in your life, like before you have to give a speech. Stand in your Wonder Woman position. And they call it that, whether men or women do it. It's kind of interesting. And after that, they swabbed how much testosterone people had in their saliva. They had them do that without telling them why. Then they swabbed it again. And then they had them play poker. And the ones who had stood in that position and had higher hormonal changes took more risks in poker. So it is the risk-taking behavior. And she said you should share it with everybody because it's so powerful. And it's an interesting thing that you can change your mind by changing your body position. And often we don't think of that. We think that it goes the other way. She also said if you forced people to smile, even by putting a pen in their mouth for a minute, they felt happier at the end of the minute. They reported when they had to take little surveys, their body smiling made them feel happier. I don't know, I give that to you. So proxemics is a really interesting thing. I think you should consider it. We have about 4 minutes. I'm going to go really fast. Environmental factors. Architecture is designed. That's kind of a message we send to the world, and it has an effect on our mind. Colors. They did a study and they found out that orange and yellow makes us hungry. And so in the 70s, a lot of restaurants, McDonald's, Burger King, were painted orange inside because it made us hungry, and we'd eat and we'd go back up and get fries. And they had a whole thing that if you painted your room pink, it made a warm glow, and it made you feel loved and made you feel peaceful and comfortable. And so a lot of women's magazines said, paint your makeup room pink or paint the ceiling pink. And it makes you calm, makes you feel peaceful. So they tried it in a men's prison, and it did not have that same effect. Because culturally, men at the time did not enjoy having their rooms painted pink. They felt insulted. So it doesn't always work. Let's talk briefly about chronemics, and then we're almost going to be done. Chronemics is showing up on time or not on time. And you may have noticed that the boss can be late, but everybody else has to be on time to a meeting, because power lets us give off these nonverbals that we don't have to be on time. Our time is more usefully spent somewhere else. But they point out that cultures have different views on time. Some cultures are 8 o'clock means 8 o'clock, but other cultures, 8 o'clock means really come at 10. So you have to know what the meaning of coming to us punctually means. Sometimes it's important, and sometimes it is important to not do it. We have 4 minutes. Paralanguage is vocal communication that does not involve words. It's words like coughing, gasping, laughing, murmuring. And it's also vocal qualities, volume, pitch, inflection. All of those can change meaning. And we did that experiment with O. The last one I'll say is silence. Silence can communicate a lot of messages. One, we slow down when things are important, speeches, funeral oratory, and we leave space in between and let people think about things. But silence can also mean shutting people out, and it can mean I'm angry with you. If I am quiet and I don't respond when someone asks me something, giving them the silent treatment. So it's a nonverbal, it's a literal nonverbal. It's silence. Silence can have a meaning. And I think that's interesting. I wanted you to see that. The rest of it, they talk about digital media and how to overcome nonverbal communication. Do emojis, which they call emoticons, do those work? Probably not as well as you think if they're done badly, but sometimes they do. And then they say, to improve your nonverbal communication, one thing you want to do is monitor it. You may want to videotape yourself, watch yourself in pictures, tape yourself, watch yourself in the mirror. And then they say, please interpret other people's nonverbal communications carefully, tentatively. Don't be so quick to rush to judgment, because cultural differences mean they may not be saying what you thought they said, or personal differences. Everybody's different. Personal communications, also every situation contextually is different. So even though we think we know what nonverbal communication might mean, give other people the benefit of the doubt is what it's saying, because sometimes it might not mean what we're interpreting it as. It's not all cut and dried. Best to ask them. There we go. So for the assignment for today, you're going to compare this chapter with chapter 4. It's a 5-paragraph essay. It's laid out on Moodle, and it tells you in the introduction, I want this, then I want you to answer these questions, and then I want a little conclusion. So it's a 5-paragraph essay for tomorrow. Are there questions? We went through nonverbals kind of fast, but I think it's fun. I like it. I think I could spend a lot of time studying nonverbals, especially if it meant I got to go to the places, go to Japan and see what they're doing. with nonverbal communication. Go to Nigeria and see what they're doing. Watch movies about China. I don't know. Are there questions, comments? Everybody did a wonderful job today. Really a wonderful. Yeah.
So when I was in college before, so many years ago, we had a communication class and we had to videotape ourselves and doing a speech, and then we had to watch it, which is like torture. And then you had to write like your thing about yourself and then redo it. Oh, it was terrible, terrible. But those are my terror stories from communication class. I can remember sitting in the classroom. I remember going and doing our videos and having to go into the other room and watch it. Oh, terrible. But that's what people do.
I used to teach public speaking, and at first I did that. And then I realized people are already afraid of public speaking sometimes, and then they're afraid of being videoed. And when you do both of those things, it's a lot. But it's useful because you'll find out that a lot of people are doing this. They don't realize. Or they're tapping.
Mhm.
Yeah. Or they've got their hands in their pockets and it's pulling their clothes kind of weird.
Mhm.
Sometimes they'll rock the podium. Have you seen that? Or they'll tap their ring. And you may not realize you're doing it. And when you see it on video, it is enlightening, isn't it?
Yes. And a lot of people get into those habits of saying like, and now because I had that class, I hear them. And so when people are speaking and they say like a lot or a lot, I'm like, oh, you did not go through a communication class where you learn not to do that.
Those verbal pauses, yes. It helps, I think, in a communication class to learn that those are distractions. That was fun. I'm glad you did that. I'm glad I'm not doing that to people here. It's a lot, isn't it? That was fun. Thanks a lot, you all. Have a good afternoon. See you later. I'll send the link when it comes in a couple hours from now. I'll send it out. Adios. We're being cross-cultural. Guten Tag. No. Auf Wiedersehen. Bye, Allison.